Well, today I have another one of my favorite pieces. The Twinkle, Twinkle Variations by Mozart. I like teaching variation sets because it teaches us a bit about the compositional process as well. You know, what do we do when we have a theme? How can we develop it? What are the tools we have at our disposal? It starts very simply. With only an ornament at the end of the first phrase to suggest that something more is going to happen. It's a standard 4x4 measures, so an 8-bar phrase. We start in the tonic of C major. When we get to the fourth measure, there's an implication of G, the dominant. Then we cadence back in C. The second part of the theme. He continues almost as if we have two melodies. We've had in the left hand, and now, as if to kind of emphasize the dominant, the G is the lowest note. It's an interesting way of doing it, and these intervals that contract. And then that's an 8-bar section. And then we return to the original part of the theme. So we have melody, we have harmony. What else do we have at our disposal as a composer as well as a performer to create expression? Well, of course, we have dynamics. But if you're composing, you think about texture. And texture can refer to the density of the notes. How many notes at one time, how many notes on the page. And so that changes in the first variation. Obviously now we have 16th notes instead of quarter notes, 16th. That's a lot more activity and density. And for this, he actually doesn't do much to change the left-hand part, except to write this slur to create that legato line. It gives us an emphasis of that counter melody. And then chords to emphasize that cadence. He's propelling it forward and actually showing us the harmony with those grace notes. Then he continues, the same idea. Then he kind of gives us an arabesque. He adds to it. It's almost like a fish is jumping now. And then back to the beginning. So this has primarily been right hand activity. The next one where's the activity? It's in the left hand. We have 16ths with this rather interesting where he emphasizes the harmonies are kind of in very stark form. They're implied. We don't have chords, but the implication of the harmonic line is there, you know, especially as we go on towards the end of it. 4, 5, 1. And he's even in the right hand. It's an interesting evolving of the theme. We've had, now we have, he adds a fifth, then ties it over for a dissonance with the A, suspension to the F, then explicitly stated chords with these overlap notes. It's a very clever way of, you know, making the texture thicker, because how do we make a texture thicker? Well, we add notes, right? Or we hold the notes longer. Well, he's added notes and he's overlapping them to create a dissonance, which also, it spices up the theme a bit. And then I'm going to talk about one more, and then I want to talk about what to do if you're not the most advanced student and you want to be able to play this set, because I've had a lot of success with less advanced students playing it because there's a variety of difficulties and they're all interesting. But after now having the theme, right hand activity, left hand activity in this last one, coupled with these suspensions and these chords in the right hand, now what do we have going on? Well, he's expanded the compass to 2 octaves. And we have triplets. We now have a sense of 3. We're in 2. Bum, 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 bum. Or really maybe in 1 if it's faster. Bum, 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 bum. But anyway, the triplets now. Not a lot happening in the left hand, but he's made them thirds. He's made them more explicitly chords, like we would have melody in the right hand and accompaniment in the left hand. Then for variation 4, he flops it. They're really kind of, well, it's interesting. This business, the suspensions, what variation does that come from? Well, it comes from variation 2. And of course, is an answer to the right-hand triplets of variation 3. You see, it's interesting how you retain something from before and then it develops further. And sometimes you introduce new elements altogether. So, before I do some of the more complicated ones as I go on, what would you do if you wanted to study them on your own, or you're a teacher and you're not quite sure, you can't do all of them? Well, clearly the theme works very well. We have to have the theme and variations anyway. And depending on the ability of the student, actually the triplet one perhaps, but I really like number 7. Because if they've studied their scales, it's not so hard to do. It's got simple chordal accompaniments. They're only, the octaves. If you have a student who can't reach the octaves, have them do a single note. Perhaps, this is also an option. And as we go on for the very last phrase, that sounds like it's really complicated, but it's not. We have in the right hand the 6th going to the 7th, hear that beautiful dissonance, resolving to the 6th, 7th, 6th, 7th, 6th, cadence. And we can actually start it, blocking it as a chord as we did, or even we can hear the harmony. So it's a beautiful harmonic progression, really. So number 7 is an excellent one. Number 5. It's a bit like a duet, isn't it? The right hand starts, the left hand answers it. And it's almost as if it prompts the right hand to go further. Now here, after the 8 bars, the left hand kind of takes the lead. And notice we have just separate notes, no articulations marked in the left hand, but we do have 2 note slurs in the right hand. So he's changed the texture yet again to add interest and to differentiate the hands. It's another compositional technique and something as a student or performer, something we want to bring out. Another one, well, you know, 3 or 4 with the triplets, maybe. It depends on the level of the student. Another one would be number 9. What's interesting about this is it adopts that right-hand dissonance that we had back. Oops. Actually in variation 2. And in variation 4. So it's interesting that it's adopted in 9. Except for getting down to that octave in time, this isn't terribly, terribly complicated. And so it's something that could be done. Now, every variation set worth its weight in salt has to have a minor key. And this is one I would include for most students as well. What's interesting here, we continue that dissonance in the right hand with those held notes, those tied notes. The finger substitutions. Notice here I get the 5, then I play the 4, might substitute to the 5. A finger substitution is where we play a note and then we slide to the next note. And it's a way to sustain and create a legato sense without using the pedal, because whenever we can make a physical connection, it's preferable to a pedal connection. Pedals should really be reserved for special effects, for floaty effects. It's actually, that's Beethoven's Moonlight, of course. Beethoven wrote the pedal for the whole first page, and it worked on his piano because of the nature of the sustain. We got a little bit too much sound for that to work. So this is one reason, it's a rather extreme example of it, but this is one reason I think it's so important to connect within the hand. But anyway, this minor, now the left hand answers at the 4th at F. Then the dominant. The phrase is repeated as in every variation, but let's go on. Dominant. You see how we have the overlap notes, as well as these really nice applied. This 6th F sharp. These chromatic contrary voice leading lines. That's a very Mozart thing to do, actually. You'll get this in different movements. But it adds a lot of interest. Because another thing I hadn't really discussed is we want to balance the types of motion. You know, we had the single lines, we had the 16th notes with the accompaniment swapped in the hands, we had the triplets. But you want to balance octaves, but you also want to balance parallel with contrary. Contrary being opposing, opposite motion, where we go, hands go in opposite directions. And so this minor key variation actually does that very nicely. Now, if your student is so inclined, this variation 10 actually makes a wonderful conclusion, and it's not as hard as it seems. Well, if you play it that fast, perhaps. But you'll notice I cross over, which is a lot of fun. But it's not that hard. I've got 6th, 3rd, 6th, 6th, 5th, and and the left hand plays the melody above. And of course the student can block it. I love this, fully diminished 7th chord, going to D major. Instead of D minor, he keeps the intensity. Then we have another 7, a 7 chord going to of C. Now C, of course, is our tonic that we want. And then another one, 7, an F sharp 7 going to a suspended G chord, 5, 7 to 1. Really beautiful. And not that hard if you block it and feel what's really happening. As we go on from the dominant, now he could have just ended the set there. It goes on with some wonderful things. I actually have a recording of this on forte piano. I'll put it in the text of this post. But I hope you enjoyed this. Contact me on the blog, on YouTube, or on Facebook by messenger, or telegraph_MTN@yahoo.com if you have pieces you would like me to discuss or you have questions.